Hello and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Domingo.
And I'm your co-host, Virginia Grenier.
We'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some inspiring conversation. Here at Language of the Soul, we know that life is story. Individually, we're the products of the stories we tell about ourselves. Culture is the amalgamation of the stories we weave about the human condition. Here's the thing. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. Thanks for tuning in and joining in the march toward human potential. Hi, guys, and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. We're very excited about this week's guest for a variety of reasons. I think, Virginia, you'd agree, just kind of interfacing with like-minded people can be inspiring, especially in this climate with so much divisiveness. Well, I'll speak for myself. For me, it's just a reminder that there are really cool people left in the world and people that are contributing not to the noise, but hopefully to something empowering for, society. Is that too grandiose?
No, I was actually thinking, to something greater than our own selves.
Yeah, exactly. Remember the collective? I feel like, there's a lot of digging in of heels right now, and we tend to forget that we're all entangled, not to get too metaphysical straight out the gate. But it's going to be the way out of this is recognizing our interconnectivity, just my opinion. But speaking to artists, it seems to be inspiring for me. Artists and storytellers, that's the whole premise of our podcast is storytelling is how we transform, way more so than persuasion or propaganda, right? You kind of change paradigms or change minds by touching hearts.
Agreed.
Good. Then we'll continue. No, but truly, and even just catching up with old friends, Greg Spalenka, it had been a while, but it really reminds me there's some assholes in the world, and if you get on social media, you're reminded of that real quick. And then you're reminded, wow, there are people that are actually putting out, something worthwhile into the universe. So I think the world of this guest, and I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. He's a former student who has been a colleague for many, much longer than he was a student. I'm going to ask him straight out the gate what effing year he graduated, because I know it was pretty early on in my teaching. So anyway, we've been colleagues now for, I think, 25 plus years, but we'll check facts on that. Anyway, but I think the world of him and his work. I just really love his work, but more than that, I love his mind and how it works. So I think he's no pressure, but I think he's going to have a lot to say about the creative process, creative expression, and storytelling. So he came to the right place at our invitation. Okay, Brian Thompson is an illustrator and an art director with over 20 years of experience in video games, visual development, and book illustration. His work has appeared in Spectrum, Wired Magazine, and the World of Warcraft trading card game. And he has created over 15 young adult book covers for HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, and Simon & Schuster. A graduate of Art Center College of Design, Brian is currently art director at Night Street Games, developing an original title. He previously served as art director at Amazon Games Studio and spent 14 years at Big Fish Games, where he co-created the acclaimed Drawn trilogy and Fetch. Now based in Europe with his wife and 2 children, Brian explores themes of creativity and the subconscious in his personal work, spanning pen and ink drawings, children's books, and writing. He is passionate about teaching and the creative process. Welcome, Brian Thompson.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Yeah, in case you didn't get that, we're excited to pick your brain. So thanks for making it happen. Being 8 hours ahead, are you, or 9 hours?
Yeah, 8 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for making this happen. I guess straight up. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just it's been something that we've wanted to do for a while, and I remember you asking me, and then life kind of got in the way, and time flies, and so I'm happy to be doing it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's I've been wanting you on for a while, probably since day one, in fact. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be, things have to line up, and when it's meant to be, things tend to happen. So I'm excited, and No pressure, but straight out the gate, I want to ask a rote question we've been asking in the new season. And then it's kind of, Virginia, it's kind of evolved, right? There's a new version of it. So you're the lucky one. You're going to get 2 rote questions. And the first one is, and then I want to follow up on some stuff in your bio. Did I get anything wrong, by the way? Is there anything in the bio you would want to correct?
No, but I graduated in 2000, so you were right.
Oh, wow.
Almost exactly.
Wow, that was my guess, was
Yeah.
2001, 2002, something like that. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And then it's always amazing to me when I go on Insta or Facebook, and there is nepotism at Art Center, and there's also a huge alumni
Yeah.
association. But sometimes I look and I'm like, wait, was Brian in school with that person? Like, it doesn't line up, but I think we all know each other, whether we actually went to school with somebody or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's a small world, the Art Center world, for sure.
Yeah, but sometimes when I look at the mutual friends, I go, wait, they were not in the same class. In my mind, they're like decades apart. But yeah, I mean, when you teach for over 20 years, it's a mind F because, Gary Meyer, because I was in his first class, he started teaching quite late in life, but he always remembered me because I was in his first class. And so that's true too. You have a really distinct memory of your first students, but then over time, you just can't possibly remember every face and every name,
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, such fond memories of that moment because the entertainment track was rather new. And so anyway, we'll get into all that. But to start out real general, maybe you could humor us, and no pressure, but maybe you could share your thoughts on what is traditionally the role of storytelling in culture, and has it evolved over time?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and there's this idea of, we tell stories probably, thousands of years. We tell stories to communicate events, right? There's almost like a nonfiction kind of journalistic element of like, this happened and this happened, and I think we communicate events and share that and pass those, throughout your culture, throughout your community. And then you also have this kind of like spiritual level where you're trying to make sense of the world, whether it's the natural world or the spiritual world, or emotions that you might be dealing with. And I think over time, we've always associated these kinds of things with stories, a way to communicate difficult concepts, and maybe abstract concepts to people of different ages. And I really love that idea that there's this kind of combination in the human mind of wanting to know what happened, like tell me a story about this event, and help me make sense of the spiritual world. And sometimes these things have this really awesome interweaving, most often, right? Where, the gods or whatever of our religion are carrying out acts or events that then become this blurry, is that fact or fiction?
Right.
And so, has it evolved over time? I think so. And I think we're in like such a crazy time where people, like you said a little bit earlier, I think a lot of people are not reading as much anymore, myself included. And the stories that we're getting are small, tiny, bite-sized things that we can that we can actually hold in our little squirrel brains.
Right.
And
culturally, is that cultural ADD or just
I think it might be. I mean, I think that we've kind of as a society, as a species, kind of worked ourselves into that kind of frenzy. And the lack of patience and the lack of solitude and the lack of calm,
it's been said we live in an image saturated society, but also I would say we become, I just call it cultural ADD, but maybe it's evolution, and let's not put any judgment on it. We will adapt, right? But we do, for whatever reason, maybe because of all the noise and the overstimulation, you got to get their attention, and quick.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely changing. So I don't know if it's evolving, because I usually associate like, some kind of survival adaptation to evolution. And I just know that it's changing
Yep.
at
Yep.
light speed, right?
Yeah, exponentially, I would say. Yep, I'm with you on all of that. So thank you for that. Virginia, any comments, any questions?
I know I was thinking the same thing, that we are constantly surrounded by, the noise, be that, it just feels like everybody's just kind of shouting into the chasm.
Yeah.
Just
Shouting.
trying.
I used to call X, well, whatever we called it before. I used to say it's like shouting into a tornado.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Love me, love me. But yeah, I mean, I sorry to interrupt you, Virginia. Maybe you can chime in. I just feel like there's a huge difference between content and then the story that transforms. So maybe we're being inundated with content, but it's maybe for the almighty dollar or for engagement,
Right.
right? Which is indirectly for the almighty dollar, or propaganda, which, getting into somebody's pocketbook is propaganda in a way. It just is seeking a different outcome. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm the snob who's going to say, okay, but as things evolve, if more and more content or noise or vacuous content, call it what you want, if we're being inundated with that, then some new form of art that we don't yet recognize is going to rise from those ashes. One hopes.
I
Does
agree.
that make sense?
Yeah, I think that there's that pendulum, and hopefully, everything is in some cycle. And it feels like when you reach one extreme, and like you said, of saturation, then
Mm-hmm.
I sure hope that people will be so ready and almost desperate for connection, and that's where that's going to come from. And
Yep.
that's another thing about storytelling that I think is it's to remind us of our um, of that connection that we all share, that human condition that we're all a part of.
Yep.
And these great stories, some of the best stories are the ones that do that. And they might shock or surprise you.
Remind us that we're all interconnected. Or
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, I agree with all that. And it's been said too. Gen Alpha. What is it? Gen Alpha
Mhm.
is
Hmm.
starved for exactly what we're talking about. They're kind of
Yeah.
done with. Anyway, and in the back of my mind, I read a little. I think it was an Insta post yesterday. It was a trailer created, of course, all in AI, right?
Hmm.
Saying, "Hey, we're cobbling together a bunch of tropes, and we're going to do a whole series." And it was satire, it was comedy, but they were talking about this whole series they're doing with just AI generated imagery and characters, and even the script was cobbled together with the old tired tropes, and it was very funny. But it's like, is that the future? And so that's where I
Yeah.
decided something new will arise. It always does. And if we're watching nothing but AI content that I would argue doesn't really have inspiration as part of the creative process, it's really just got an outcome, right, as its
Hmm.
impetus, then something else, there's going to be, like you said, a starvation for something more that reminds us of our humanity, like you said, or our interconnectivity.
Yeah, I think with raising kids, so I have like two teenagers now, and
Scary. Sorry.
it is
Scared.
scary. And you really see that with the amount that students in school are being asked to read. So it's not just what they read in their free time, but also what they're being asked to read. Basically there's just no reading happening. They're reading
Mm,
passages, they're reading parts of things. Teachers are struggling so much with the attention, the lack of attention.
mhm.
And when you're not reading, I was listening to this one thing, I can't remember who it was, but by reading, that's how you actually step into other people's shoes,
Of
and you
course.
you discover like empathy, and you
Of,
you get into these characters' shoes, and then you go through these experiences with them. And there's a level of empathy that comes from that you just can't really get anywhere else. And the only other place would be like meet a lot of people, talk
mhm,
to a
mhm.
lot of people, and really get to know their stories.
Yep.
But that's harder and harder and harder to do. And especially if everybody, let's say you put your phone down for a minute and you walk around the street and you might find somebody who's not on their phone, then how much time do they have? How much time do you have to really get to know them? So we're just in this like fast-paced society, and I think the younger generation is basically, you were saying they're kind of starved of that connection, but they're almost like not growing up with it. Where
Yeah.
we came from I can kind of remember that transition where I was reading a lot and then it just kind of fell off a cliff.
Yeah. So if you're not learning empathy and compassion, right, through reading, then the next step would be, just engage with what's around you, but they don't have the
Yeah,
tools to do that, right? That's the
exactly.
scary part.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
confirm some of the things that you said, and this is the part where, yes, the book does go into this and the podcast is loosely based off the book. But yeah, there are very clear-cut studies that say when you read about the other that you might not otherwise, right, be privy to, well, that
Mhm.
grows compassion more than anything. And it tends to be literary fiction more than commercial fiction, of course. But yes, one of
Yeah.
the biggest outcomes is empathy, which is kind of the word of the day, in light of the political violence lately, right? The word empathy has been coming up a lot. But
Oh, yeah.
sorry.
I wanted to say something to what both of you kind of were talking about, especially you, Brian, is because I have a 15-year-old, soon to be 16-year-old,
Mhm.
which is even more scary because she's going to be driving soon. But she's been doing online school, and I actually just did the whole parent-teacher conference, and the language arts teacher was there, and we're just kind of talking about like where my daughter was with reading and stuff, and she does read like on her own, but in language arts, like you're saying, yeah, it's like just passages and stuff. And the
Yeah.
reason why the language arts teacher wanted to meet with me is because she had to do a reflective video essay back. And she's like, it's really hard to tell you what my opinions are when I feel like everything's a fragmented narrative.
Oh,
Mhm.
And I thought that was interesting that she picked up on that she's not really getting the full story by reading just sections of a
Right.
book.
Well, do you remember we would read the Cliff's Notes?
yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
I think we all have some version of, I don't know. I will say this: everything I was ever forced to read in school
Mhm.
blew me away, and I fell in love with it. And you know what I mean? Everything from Great
Yeah.
Expectations to Wuthering Heights to The Outsiders to Summer of My German Soldier. I think the reading lists changed over the years, but the stuff I was
Yeah.
forced to read made me who I am, and I
Mhm.
would count them all as influences in my writing.
Yeah.
So anyway, we did do the Cliff's Notes, but I would say, do you remember Virginia? We had not going to remember which guest, but one guest that was in education said they were called to the carpet by a parent who said, "Why are you making my child write? I'm paying," I think it was a tutoring situation. "I'm
Mhm.
paying you to teach my child to read." Was it the other way around? But like
That was
they
how it
didn't
was,
get
yeah.
that the conceptualization process, to interpret what you're reading requires that you formulate your thoughts and you employ executive function, right? Which is the thing that's missing really, is that
Yeah.
follow through and that executive function.
Yeah.
But if you're having everything spoon fed to you, and I guess that whatever version of the Cliff's Notes they're getting now, you're not engaging with it. It's got to be interactive.
Yeah, and well, that's what my daughter was saying when she said it was a fragmented narrative because she's like,
Mhm.
you want me to use critical thinking skills and tell you what I'm picking up, and all I can tell you is what I'm glimpsing in this one moment of time from this passage of a whole story. So
Mhm,
Yeah.
I see.
how can I really tell you what my overall thoughts are of these
Yes.
characters if I don't know anything more than what I just read? I mean, it's like literally like reading the headlines.
Right,
Yeah.
right. A little snippet. Well,
Hmm.
also, here's what I'll say. Sorry, we'll get back on track. But I did a reading of this, probably my first screenplay, and I got some good feedback from actors saying, "Wow, I can really sink my teeth in, and this is pretty raw. This is pretty rare to see." They sensed that it was a lived experience and it transcended or whatever. It was horrible. Trust me. I got much better at the technique of screenwriting, but they felt the rawness in it and they really liked it. So I did a reading with actors. And Virginia, you probably remember, my friend Keith left midway through and he was a Scientologist and he diagnosed me. He wrote a letter the first sentence I couldn't even roll with. He goes, "Death is the accumulation of pain." And I'm like, "I'm out," because I don't even know if I agree with that. But anyway, he went on
Right.
to diagnose me, and I very much thought, no, 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 you didn't stay for the redemptive part, right? You didn't even, I hate to say message, but there was thematic content that was very redemptive. But you show the good, the bad, and the ugly, including the pain, right?
Hmm.
Because you can't tell the story without it. But I just thought, you don't get to have an opinion because you didn't hang in there for the whole message of the damn thing. Does that make sense? So when you get just a fragment like your daughter, yeah, you can't talk about the thematic content because the want and the need and whether they were met, and then the thematic content that results from that, yeah, it's going to be completely lost on you.
it's really fascinating to think about, just because as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about my kids. And so my son is 15 and my daughter's 17, so she's going to be going to college soon. Um, but we talk about like the adaptation and the changing brain. So if
Mm,
if our kids, like if our 15-year-old, like my son and your daughter, Virginia, are being fed or being asked to read these small snippets, which are probably quite a bit longer than most of the things that the kids are reading, right? Most of the
Mhm.
things that kids are reading are going to be those headlines or, some, uh,
meme.
subtitle overlay of a YouTube video or whatever,
Mm.
um, is the brain, I mean, definitely the brain is changing. The brain
Mhm.
chemistry is changing um, to consume these small bits of information. Now, if that higher level functioning, the executive functioning, isn't there to go along with it, then you have a problem. And how is the brain going to adapt beyond that? Because one could argue that the future is just a bunch of humans consuming tiny bits of information, but making huge decisions and judgments about that, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know what
But
that
what do you
looks like.
do in your
It's
parent?
scary.
Like, you can't really control how academia or the public education is handled. But what do you do in your parenting to kind of develop those skills?
Well, for me, I mean, I'm sure Virginia has thoughts on this too, but for me, I have find it really, really hard. I mean, like we're not successful, I would say. I mean, I have my daughter was a natural reader. That was just what she did. She loved books. She had read, more books by the time she was um like 12 or something than I had read in my whole life. And that's just not an exaggeration.
Well, look at her
She
parents, though. She got it from
yeah.
somewhere for sure.
Yeah, my wife is a writer and she reads a ton. But
Right.
it was
Well,
just one of those things where I was like, wow, this is kind of amazing. And and then with my son, it was really the opposite. I mean, it was hard for him to stay focused and sit. And he really loved when he was little to have stories read to him.
mm,
And so that was what we did early on. But then you get this kind of deluge of the phones and social media and everybody, you get to a point where everybody has a phone, and at some point you're like, geez, my kid needs a phone because they're starting to get older and they're going to be out and about, and I want to be able to get a hold of them. But you know, there's that tool functionality of the phone is like the tiniest amount that it's used, right? I mean, it's just a device to stay connected through Snapchat and
it,
all that stuff.
I find it a diversion. Like, instead of just waiting at that bus stop and noticing the birds splashing through the puddle or the dollop of light on the cement, you're not in the moment because you have a convenient diversion. I also, in
Yeah.
my teaching, by the way, I remember the moment where I thought, okay, they're walking in the classroom, doing anything but making eye contact. And you know what I
Yeah.
mean? The phone is a great way of never learning that skill. And I don't know if everybody did this, but I remember in my, I don't know, early 20s, as you're figuring out who you are, I guess, like, confidence never meant much to me, or I wasn't that important. I just thought, well, confidence is just faux confidence. But I did think, I'm going to look everybody in the eye today.
Hmm.
I'm not in New York, so I can look everybody that I pass in the eye and maybe even nod or say hello. Like, I think we all had that rite of passage where we were trying to just be human. And
Yeah.
like, I just remember, oof, they're not even saying hello to the teacher in an ass kissing way. Like, what is that? Wouldn't you? Isn't I don't know. But the phone was a great way of not developing those social skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I'm seeing that in my own household. It's easy for everybody to show up and kind of like look stuff up on their phone and not really interact with each other when my when
Right.
my
Hmm.
when my kids get together because my two older ones are out of the house. Um, but what I have done, because Sabrina, I'm saying her name, she doesn't care. She's out there on anyways. But yeah, Sabrina's pretty much uh, she loves to read, and so I'm lucky that and she has her genres of books that she likes to read. But what I have found that we have done, and I think it's helpful too because her older siblings do the same thing, is when my youngest is on her phone and surfing social media and stuff comes up, or she hears about something, she'll come and ask us. And with my older ones, I was a typical parent. I did the whole, here's my opinion, here's where I'm coming from, here's my thoughts. And I think I have, which drives her, my youngest, insane, but I have shifted to
Hmm.
where instead I kind of reflect back like, oh, so what I'm hearing is you're finding that sad, and it's just because of my counseling that she gets mad. She
Mm.
goes, quit therapizing me. But what happens is I'm turning the table on her because I'm actually getting her like right now. Actually, her and her siblings are in a disagreement with each other, and she wants me to give her the answer of what she should do, and I'm like, I don't know what you should do. I know what I would do, but I can't answer what you're going to do. And so I'm actually making her talk it out and work it out with me, like I would anybody sitting across from me on the counseling couch,
Mhm.
which drives her nuts. But it gets her brain thinking, and I think
Hmm.
that's something I think as parents now we have to do because exactly what you said, Brian. They just don't get that same kind of interaction that we all did
Hmm.
growing up.
Yeah, and that thinking is hard. I mean, it's like you actually feel the effort that your brain is undergoing when you're bored. And I mean,
Yes.
when I was younger and I was bored, it was the feeling that I wanted the most. And like, because I didn't call it boredom. I mean, of course, I would be like, "Oh, mom and dad, I'm bored. I'm so bored." But
Right.
really, for me as an artist, that was the time when I just, I drew, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I hungered for that like my whole adult life. Like as I got into, being a professional artist, I wanted that boredom so badly.
Mhm.
And but when I can see it in the kids, like when they're thinking through something that's difficult and they'll do it, they save that energy for school.
Mhm.
And then when they're not in school, they're like, oh, this is my release time. This is my chill time. And what that really means, the kind of hidden meaning of that is like, I'm just not thinking, you know?
Yeah, well, we talked about executive function as well, and I think the boredom is where creativity arises from, right? If you're not,
Yes.
and yes, I never used that word either. In fact, as a kid, I would think, how could you be bored when there's elephants in Africa and to learn about and zebras? Like the world is such a fascinating. I recognized that as a kid. Like,
Yeah.
how could somebody be bored?
Yeah.
But I do think maybe being in the moment and not having that diversion 24/7 of a device, that is right kind of where all creativity arises from. I mean, letters to a young poet, right? It's not isolation, but it is stillness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway,
I
we
was
can
thinking,
go ahead.
well, I just wanted to follow up on that because when we were kids, at least for me, we had that like the Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever,
Right, right.
the illustrated
Mhm.
one, and it was
Oh
on the
yeah.
bookshelf.
Yep.
And just to think if you didn't have that and you could see elephants in Africa, every type of elephant, every video about elephants,
Mm-hmm,
every
mm-hmm,
possible thing about elephants immediately.
mm-hmm.
And the human brain is so, we can like quantify and we can categorize and we can, so you have all of that access on your phone. Imagine because when we were
Mm.
little,
You got to
I
fill
would
in the
sit down.
gaps.
Oh my gosh, I would lay down on the rug and with my feet in the air and I would flip through the Encyclopedia Britannica with the amazing illustrations
Mhm.
and I would fantasize about those other worlds. And I think that act of fictionalizing, like imagining that we just don't, we're skipping that step
Yeah.
because everything is like, I can just see a picture and now I don't even know. Now it's AI, but like,
Right, right, right.
and
It's off the
that
charts now.
totally blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's what I meant by image saturated and simply oversaturated because, yeah, that's what imagination is filling in the gaps when not everything is handed to you, right? And that's how it becomes interactive. And
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. This is related a little bit in terms of the overstimulation, but this is probably 20 years ago now. I remember, the latest greatest Matrix had come out and I already had God knew what was on the horizon with AI, right? But I
Mhm.
already being in entertainment, I already thought, God, does everything have to be exploding helicopters all the time and have a toy attached or some franchise? And where's the real raw storytelling that speaks to the human condition? And yes, I was aware there were commercial films and more niche films or art films or independent films. I was aware of all of that. But I did think, why is every studio picture about the body count or,
Right.
the exploding hell? It was really effects driven. Everything at that moment was effects driven. And I say the third Matrix. I don't know. It was somewhere in there. But I remember I almost walked out, and I always get my money's worth. I've almost never walked out of a film. But I was just so aware at that moment, like, I can't rub two nickels together to make my own films right now, but yet they're throwing money at these effects driven films. But then the next day, I went to the Bodhi Tree bookstore. I don't know if either of you remember that, on Melrose. Really great. Yeah, great bookstore. And there was a performance of Vietnamese shadow puppetry. And it's about as minimal as it sounds. It's these really beautiful semi-transparent puppets that are a real art. It's kind of like Oaxacan wood sculpture, like the whole culture learns this craft. And anyway, and they just tell the story with the shadows on the wall from these really beautiful puppets. And I'm sorry, that rocked my world more than the overstimulation of that Matrix film.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by, like, hopefully we'll return. And again, Gen Alpha is supposedly starved for it. And that's why actually Disney is bringing back 2D. I don't know if you guys have heard that.
No.
Yeah, well, it's speculation, but they have, some of my animator friends have been hired back to start doing little experimental sequences and training younger animators. So it's happening.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I didn't really care that much one way or the other, because to me, it's storytelling that matters, not the medium or the technique. But there's something about the archival quality, returning some value back to archival quality materials, and even in the fine art realm, right? I think there's something to be said for tangible art.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Always more to say, but I'm going to go on to our second rote question, Brian.
Yeah.
So in all of that, I think I love what you said, by the way, about the role of storytelling in culture and how it's evolved. So what makes you a storyteller? I know that you probably identify, I don't want to put words in your mouth, as a visual storyteller, but you're also a writer. So simply put, what makes you, Brian Thompson, a writer? A storyteller? Sorry, what makes you a storyteller?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Yeah. That's a deep question.
Should we do part two?
I think that what makes me a storyteller is that I feel like there's just an inherent kind of magic in everything. And my whole life, I've been a very keen observer of things. I was quiet as a kid, and I was really artistic early on. And I think I looked and noticed. And I think that one of the things I try to do, or that I hope that I do, I don't set out to do it, but I want people to feel something. I want them to have a response to something. And I'm just going to digress slightly to, I started getting into things like wood carving, specifically spoon carving, and
I
like
told
leather.
Virginia that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Like leather crafting. And what was really fascinating, there's a ton of things that I could talk about in those, but I won't. But the creating an artifact with my hands, like knowing the tree that this wood came from, shaping the wood into a spoon, giving it to someone that they will use in their kitchen to cook meals for their family, was a type of storytelling that filled me up so much. And it contrasted so much with the digital art making I had been doing for so long. And it was similar when I got into leather stuff. I just wanted to make something simple. So a wallet, I could do these simple fold over wallets and things because my skill was, I was just learning. But I started making these and then gifting them to friends and family. And when I see them, 5 years later, and they still have that wallet and the patina on the leather
Wow.
and the smell of it, and And I look at it and I'm just filled up with like I've made something with my own hands that's there's only one of those things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an artifact that person carries with them literally every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And this might have pictures of their kids and, dollar bills that have been passed from human to human throughout the whole world. And it's just, I don't know, I don't really know how to describe the mystique of that.
Well, it sounds
But
like it becomes, the storied, the
yeah,
wall,
right,
the artifact. It's not utilitarian. It might serve a function, right? And there's all these elitist views about craft versus high art, and utilitarian.
right.
But the most satisfying things can be things that last and are utilitarian by definition. But I'm hearing, I've never thought about it this way, but it's becoming storied, right, through
Yeah,
use. The
yeah,
patina tells a story. All the photographs you're talking about, it
yeah,
takes on a story almost.
Well, I was just thinking, like, and that whole and it's organic, so it's not manufactured. So as you're kind of talking about, it was making me think of the movie The Red Violin, and how that
Mhm.
violin, that's what the whole movie's about, right? Is this violin that was crafted and obviously stained in his wife's blood because she died from a miscarriage, but the fact is, and it went on to the next person, so it had its own life that was
Mm.
yeah,
breathed into this object. But as you said, Nick,
yeah.
it was storied. It
Mhm.
had its own story, and it
Yeah.
was
And
very
then
organic.
Mhm.
the yeah, a musical instrument, especially like,
Mhm.
geez, I mean, the life that an instrument has had and seen, and the places it's been, and what it's been played on it. And you know, I started feeling that when I was starting to trade drawings with people all over the world. I would do these sketches, or I would just reach out to people totally, sometimes completely cold, and just be like, "I love your artwork. Would you be willing to trade with me?" And that's kind of what that's sort of the impetus of this thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit later. But I don't know if that really answers the question very well, because it's not something that's like really concrete for me. It's
Mhm.
very intangible,
Right.
and I think that when I make something, whether it's a line on a white sheet of paper, or a spoon, or a leather craft, or a painting, or a poem, there's so much love that goes into the
Mhm.
making of it. Like
Mhm.
literally every line I love every single line.
Yep.
And
That's going to come up when we discuss your poem, I think.
yeah,
By the way,
yeah,
right? This is all interconnected. And
it
I
is
will I
all
will say
interconnected.
this,
Yeah.
a true art I'm not about to define what a true artist is. Let me start over. I think one way of looking at it is there are artists who are not that in tune with, it's unexamined. Do you know what I mean? It's visceral. Their drive to create is completely unexamined, and it's a beautiful thing. Then there are other people that learn craft and technique, and we all know the rules get in the way for a while, and then the dust settles, right? And hopefully,
Exactly.
yeah, I think we all go through some version of that where the rules become second nature and you get back in touch with why the hell you do it in the first place. So we're all somewhere on that journey of finding our voices. And then, but I do think it can remain unexamined. And there, I'll just give, without throwing anyone under the bus, my sister's a vocal instructor.
Hmm.
And I'm trained a little bit, Seth Riggs, and even my sister early on, I took some lessons with her, but it's nothing I've ever put on the front burner or pursued. So when
Yeah.
I invited her to a friend's gig, who finally at 40 something decided to get her music out there, literally her voice out there, and it was a beautiful thing to watch, and it was so gut level and visceral, and it just defies any, do you know what I mean, like conversations around technique. And yet, my
Yeah.
sister, being a vocal instructor, she was like, "Wow, she's really using her middle register beautifully, and it's a mix and the lower larynx, man." And sorry, Renee. And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Just feel it. Just be in the moment." But we all have some version of that. I'm such a sucker. I'm so relational that when I watch a movie, I forget to look at technique. Unless it's really
Yeah.
bad and the boom mic enters the frame and you see through the medium, through the message to the medium, I tend to just get so engaged that I forget to learn. I forget to learn my
Yeah.
craft when I watch films. But anyway, so I think I love it when somebody doesn't really know what makes them tick as an artist, and it can be very visceral. I know you can articulate it, Brian, but I think sometimes we over romanticize keeping it a mystery because, especially with students, they fear if I bring it out into the light, it's going to lose its potency.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there's a longer journey where you do analyze what makes you tick. And then, like all technique, it becomes, say, second nature again.
Yeah. Well, I think that I still am struggling with the question. And I think that is an honest answer. Like, I think that I'm always learning. I mean, what you described, that journey of like, oh, we have this impetus early on to be an artist and we're not sure. And then we go into art school, maybe. And then you get all of this technique and skill based stuff forced upon you. And then, you're told you're never going to amount to anything. and then 20 years later, you're like, oh, okay, like this is what I'm meant to do, and this is why. And
I think I do separate like finding your voice within your craft from like assigning it to a sense of purpose or realizing what it serves on the macro. But I want to backpedal a little bit because we're into this territory now. For our listeners, I want to backpedal and say, I love the purity, like you said, of just learning to whittle spoons. It's got a legacy and a history behind it, right? And I think I mentioned to Virginia, somebody I went to school with that I think the world of as well as an artist. I guess I won't say any names, but during the pandemic, he sent me a beautiful painting that I just treasure, And even back then, during Art Center, I guess I'm pretty shallow because he gave me $500 worth of old oil paints that he wasn't using. So that won me over way back then. But anyway, I just admire what he's up to. He is the most prolific plein air painter I know. And it really serves him to just go out every day and create a little panel. And he's just cranking these things out. So it's really beautiful to watch. But more to the point, he whittles fishing rods.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if he was raised in Hawaii. He's not Polynesian, but he was raised in Hawaii and he's a surfer. But somewhere in there, he learned this craft of whittling, and you got to get him right. It's very precise. But anyway, I really love the purity and the rawness of that. So by contrast, Art Center, I think it occasionally redefines itself. But I know when I went there, because there was no entertainment track, I founded it, for good or bad. I created that monster. But when I went there, it was all concept. I joke like I was paid to learn how to think. Sure, I think some fine artists thought, ooh, it's so elitist and so high art that if I really academically want to learn to draw and paint and learn my perspective and my composition and my color theory, I've got to take illustration, not fine art. But even so, it was very conceptual. I learned to think conceptually. That can be at odds with narrative, right? In entertainment, whether it's cinema or even, I don't know, theater or any other form of entertainment, it can be very narrative and the two can be at odds. So I just want to backpedal a little bit and say, before we talk about your career in gaming, what was your big takeaway from Art Center? What were the biggest things you learned from Art Center, if anything? I hope it's something because it's very expensive.
It wasn't as expensive as it is now, but so many things. I mean, Art Center was like just a life-defining moment. And I was going to school at University of Washington up in Seattle before that. And I was 2 years into that program where I had some teachers and they were like, look, University of Washington has more of a fine art, traditional fine art based program, and you're just not going to be happy. They could just tell. I was trying to basically do entertainment work for these fine art projects and assignments. And I had one teacher who just said, Brian, I really think you should go to Art Center in Pasadena. And it's a school that my high school art teacher had told me about too, but I had been like, no, I want a 4-year, liberal arts education, and I can't focus this early. And so anyway, after 2 years at University of Washington, I left, and I actually did that, and I bit the bullet and took out the loans and went to Art Center. And it was
probably already had your general ed, right?
I did. I basically had all my credits for that stuff, so I didn't have to do.
No
that was
wasted
nice.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to really focus. But I had so many things. I mean, so many like different epiphanies too. I mean, probably start. I'll probably start with you. Your class, and it's not just because I'm on your show. It's because you're a friend.
I hope. Okay.
But yeah, your class, you taught me so many things. Just about the bridge between the things that I love to do, build worlds, create characters, think about storytelling and the theater of it, and the audience and how the audience is reacting to what you're showing them and how you can lead them through the visual storytelling. All of that stuff was just like mind blowing to me. And it really was literally like exactly what I wanted to learn when I went to Art Center, but I had been doing all the foundations and everything. So when I got into your class, I literally was like, oh my God, like now is when it starts, you know? And that was one part. And obviously that's complex, as you know, because you taught the class. So there's lots of things that go into that. But the other thing was you introduced me to a type of like mark making and drawing that hit such a note with me. It felt so akin to the marks that I always loved, and it totally changed my drawing style. I don't know if you knew that, but
Well, I
yeah, I
remember
mean, I started.
we both probably liked, um, I don't know, like Frazetta, and I know trees. We shared an aesthetic when it came
Yes.
to trees, gnarly trees,
Yeah, but it was the,
straights
you
to
know, the
curves. That's yeah.
straights to curves. Yeah, it was straights to curves and like those sickle shaped marks and um the gestural mark was very different. It was basically like taking a lot of the facility with the pencil that we had been honing with figure drawing
Mhm.
and bringing that way of
Mhm.
drawing into um drawing layouts or drawing environments or setting up a scene or whatever like that. And so that's where I really fell in love with the mark.
Mm.
So I
And
attribute
now
that to
you're
you
way
for
off the.
sure.
Wow. Well, I think if anything, I just saw it in you, and I may have encouraged it, but I saw something really beautiful there. And I would say, in terms of mark making, which is not a word, that term doesn't come off my lips often,
Yeah, yeah.
but you're all about that, and you are off the charts. So
Oh,
I didn't
thank
learn.
you.
Well, really, I there's the Sienkiewicz's of the world, and there's Hogarth, and there's Magnola, and there's a lot of people that work with positive and negative space, right? And how the line
Yeah.
interacts with these solid fields of black and figure ground relationships. There's huge history that I've never seen anything like your work, where it all comes together, and
Oh.
it's way more expressive than anything else that's out there. So I want to ask you, does sumi mean anything to you? Do you think about traditions like sumi or mark making? What's your relationship with mark making? Because it's way
Well,
off the
yeah.
charts. You may have learned something in my class, but I think it was what I saw in you that I tried to encourage you in, if anything.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying all that. I mean, it's like you've always been kind of one of my heroes. So for you to talk about my work that way it really means a lot to me, really, honestly. And I think that, we studied Notan, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
studied like, yeah, Sumi ink and Japanese calligraphy and
At Art Center?
well, I think it may be part of design class
Oh, okay.
when we're looking just at shape. But then also just stuff that I was into. I was really into these, kind of gestalt type, masses. And there's something that really clicked for me. And it might have been in your class, it might have been in a figure drawing class, maybe with when we were doing do you remember when you do the powdered charcoal?
Mm.
You rub the rubbing and then you do
Vince Robbins? Was
the
that in?
erase out.
Yeah, I do.
No, no, I
It
don't.
wasn't Vince
No,
Robbins. Okay.
it
I do
wasn't Vince
remember that
Robbins. No.
assignment. Yeah, we all had
Yeah,
to do a huge, yeah.
yeah, and that's when another place where I was like, okay, I'm going to bring those marks into the negative shape making,
Mm.
and then I started looking at the negative shape just as earnestly as the positive shapes, and I think it just evolved out of that. I mean, of course, I was a big Magnola fan. I fell in love with Sergio Topi, who I didn't really know when I was at Art Center, and I kind of learned about him later in life.
Mhm.
And I think moving to Europe, you go to a comic book store here, and it's
Oh my
just
God.
so different than like all the French artists.
I
And
was gonna say, do you spend time in Paris at all?
no, I still haven't been. I
Oh
still
my
haven't
God.
been to
Well,
Paris.
les
Yeah.
bouquinistes, the bouquinistes along the Seine and
Uh-huh.
the whole Latin Quarter. It's all bande dessinée, which is comics, bande dessinée, graphic
Oh
novels. And it's so
my
appreciated
gosh.
there in a way that it's not here. Your mind is, I'm sure you've already been exposed to a lot of it, but the French ones will blow your mind. Yeah. And
Yeah.
sadly,
Do you know?
I stocked up on them when I was living there, and every single one of them is now moldy, and the pages are stuck together because I watered
Oh
my
no.
plants in my armoire. Like my armoire became my bookshelf, and
Yeah.
for years I watered my plants, not realizing it was dripping down into my bande dessinée. So
Oh yeah. Like do you know the artist Manu Larsenet? Do you know him?
maybe, would you know a
I
title?
hope well, he's done so many works, but the latest one is his version of The Road. He did a graphic novel interpretation of Cormac McCarthy's The Road.
Mm.
And
No, I'll check it out for
oh,
sure.
you
Yeah.
need to check it out. Oh, it's so good. But he's also like he's very chameleon-like with his styles, which is something I really love because he's a very prolific comic book and graphic novelist who changes style all the time.
Mhm.
And that's
Well,
something
let me
that I
ask
think,
you
yeah.
then, because we do distinguish between voice and style. So
Oh
I
yeah.
like that he's versatile, right?
Mhm.
In style, versatile, adaptable in style. Do you see a voice that shines through all of that? A sensibility, a worldview, something like that? What does
Yes.
he bring to the table despite the style, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's that like real strong sense of pathos, maybe is that the right word? Like just the
Mm-hmm.
human, there's a visceral quality that stylistically his work brings out. And he
Right.
again he navigates different styles, but he always has that voice of like wanting to get deeper into the kind of visceral nature of our experience.
Mm.
And I don't speak French, so most of the books I've seen are in French, and I need to find English, versions of them. But I get that a lot through the narrative
Image.
work and
Yeah,
yeah, the sequential
picture's
work.
worth 1,000 words, they say, right?
Exactly.
Not to
Yeah,
spew a
yeah.
bunch of cliches, but it's kind of true. If you can tell a story visually, you're 90% there. Words are cheap. But
Right.
I do speak French, so hey, be good practice
Yeah.
for me. Ask me any questions
I
about
don't
your
have any French. I don't have any French questions.
Well, nowadays on the interwebs, you don't even need to go to Google Translate anymore. If you
Yeah.
use the AI function in Google, you can literally say, "What does bande dessinée mean?" and it'll tell you.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I
So
use my it's funny when I'm in bookstores, I use my Google Lens, it's got that like instant translate. So
right.
I'm like I'm reading it,
I say we're all
that
part of
way.
the problem and not the solution here
I know, I
when it
know.
comes to technology. Anyway, thanks for going into all that. For our non-artists, because we don't even know really. We like to think we know our listeners, right, Virginia? But who knows really? But to bring it back to story a little bit, because we're getting specific in terms of mark making and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So I just wonder, coming from Art Center, which probably was in transition when you were there, right? It was still, I'm sure, somewhat conceptual. You probably still had plenty of editorial illustrator
Yes.
teachers. And then
Yeah.
entertainment was rather new.
Mhm.
So you went into gaming. Now, I worked on a few
Yeah.
titles in gaming, just a few, and it was
Yeah.
largely gameplay driven. So the art direction was always gameplay driven.
Yeah.
But the titles you worked on straight out the gate, it seems like at Big Fish, were
Mhm.
largely narratively driven, drawn and
Yes.
sketch. Are those the
Fetch.
two? Fetch, I'm sorry.
Fetch. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were and you were the mastermind largely behind those. And I know they were more narrative. And again, you can clarify this, but I think that was kind of the brand there at Big Fish
Mhm.
was a little more of a narrative slant. So tell me about how story works in gaming other than gameplay, and then your relationship with it. Like, how did you get to utilize your love of story in the gaming
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's funny because I got into games without being a gamer myself. And I
realm?
always thought this was like kind of a hindrance at first. That became more of a problem or like an issue when I was working in like AAA. I was working on big console projects. But when I moved to and it wasn't a problem for me. It's sometimes a problem for people I worked with because they were kind of snooty about, you know, if you haven't been playing games your whole
Oh,
life, then
right, right.
what are you doing working in games?
Oh, yeah. No,
But
half
in
the job postings that I see demand that you be a game lover.
yeah,
Sometimes they want a fresh eye. I was hired on a few because they wanted an animation person that was not a gamer. I love that, but it was
yeah,
the rarity, you know.
right. And I think what I was working, I was like lead concept artist at a company called Surreal, and we were working on a big open world realistic game. And I was doing all of the environment design. We were basically doing a fantasy version of Las Vegas. I know it's already a fantasy, but
Right.
we were doing our own version, which was a lot of storytelling in itself. It was almost like stage design type stuff.
Mm,
And then when this job opened up at Big Fish to art direct there, what I realized is they were doing all 2D adventure games, basically.
mhm.
Um, they have a bunch of like this genre called hidden object games. I was totally not interested in that, but they were willing to develop a new title um and they wanted it to be like a point and click adventure, kind of an old school Sierra or Myst type
Mhm,
thing.
mhm.
And as part of me taking the job, I really wanted to know if I would have full freedom to, define the style of the game.
Mhm.
And I understood that to be the case. And so I took the job and then I started developing a project that was really, there was already a game designer and he was working on this. It wasn't really going in a good direction. We were developing art for it, and I was developing a style that this was the thing that I love, Nick, is that I came out of art center and I had all of these like influences and Don Bluth and all the old Disney stuff and
Mhm.
yourself included. And I was like, oh man, like do some lean into that. And so that's what I started doing. I started doing background painting.
Mhm.
And with the shape design that I loved and the color palettes that I loved and the mood, but there was a story element that was being authored by another person who it was just all over the place. And so it was kind of like the art just always was the backdrop.
Mhm.
And then that kind of design leadership changed, and we were able to reinvent that project, and it eventually became Drawn. And it was like, well, what if there was this young girl and she had this deep story that she was engaged in, and she could paint these pictures and enter them. She painted her dreams basically, and then the
Mhm.
whole mechanic of the game was to find these paintings on the wall that were destroyed and repair them. And then once you repair them, you gain access into the world that that painting represented.
Mhm.
And so then it was journey, it was the hero's journey, it was like the combination of the juxtaposition of the world outside of the paintings and then the world inside the paintings. It
Did you
was
you would call them designers, but they're
Mhm.
writers, really. Most people would think of, right? The writers. No.
Well, in this particular case, you can have a game designer who is not a writer, and they basically are just doing it's a very difficult job, but they're kind of designing all of the gameplay mechanics.
Mhm.
And then, if there's a narrative element, they write that sometimes, or they have a writer that
Right, right.
they work with.
Right.
Yeah. But
But
so
what
in
I'm
this
getting
case,
at is, sorry, in animation, visual development and story development are hand in hand, no matter whether they
mhm,
go on for 20 years or a year and then move into
yeah,
pre-production. It's very much, the visuals, as you know, world building informs the storytelling. And
yeah,
sometimes you only build the world by indulging the concept art. So I'm just
right.
wondering how that evolved. And did you learn your storytelling sense by doing it in gaming? I'm guessing you probably learned a lot. How much did you interact with the storytelling or the story structure?
Yeah. Well, once the designer moved on, it was basically on me and Chris he was kind of like the senior producer and I was the art director and the designer left. And then we basically had our boss come to us and say, we could either hire a new game designer or you guys could just take on that role. And we were
So
like,
you poisoned
we'll
him.
do it.
Was it arsenic? You can tell me, Brian.
No. So we decided to do it. And we hadn't done that before. I mean, Chris came from a long history of playing games and working in games as a producer and just a game lover.
Did you say
And
Chris Jennings?
no, Chris Campbell.
Was he the one that
Yeah.
that came to Art Center for that lunch brunch? Remember, you guys used to come for scholarship? No, for the
Yeah.
recruiting event, and I sat next to somebody. Was that him?
No, he never came for that. No,
Okay.
I can't remember who came down with me. I came a couple times.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, that's how we became these reluctant kind of game designers / storytellers. And because it was an adventure game, it was all story. It was based up on these like kind of segments, chapters, acts, and then what the character was eventually overcoming and how you build up to that and what are the, progressive complications that lead to, this kind of story wrapping up. And then we made, I think it was 2 more. So it was a trilogy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, when I was at Art Center, I'd say outside of your class, the other big story class was, and it was a storytelling class, really, was the storyboarding with John Coven.
Mm-hmm.
You remember John?
I do. I know the name. I can't picture him right now.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm aware of him for sure.
Yeah, he taught storyboarding class, and I took that class, and I really loved it. And it was, I really wanted to storyboard my own stories, and so those became kind of like graphic novels in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And because I went way overboard for what they needed to be as true storyboards,
Mm-hmm.
but I learned kind of like the sequential storytelling and then the camera and those kinds of things that then all were tools that I used to art direct and be a storyteller in games.
Wow. Yeah, it's all making sense now. Those early influences. Not everybody can tell a story visually, and it's about information reveal, right? I would say style doesn't really matter. It depends, but in cinema or animation, we would show our reels, we call them. There was a reel for every act, and we would, of course, look at dailies, but it got greenlit act by act, which doesn't sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes a whole act would be greenlit and based on just the animatic. But I'm sorry, there would be one artist who's really good at the comedic sequences and somebody who specialized in, maybe the romance sequences, and another artist who was good at the action adventures. And drawing style did not matter at all. It was all over the board, if that makes sense, because it's really information reveal that matters. And so but I think the fact that you indulged them as illustrations more so than just a means to an end, you developed your love of graphic novels and comic books, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of explains a lot that was an early influence of yours.
Yeah, and I was able to bring all that to bear in that job and those years that I was doing that there, and it was really formative for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful work. I have one of the Art of Drawn books, only one. Are there? Are there others for the other 2 installments?
No, I think we gave that to you when you came up to speak.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful work.
That's cool.
And were they refreshed by your visual storytelling sense, which is more cinematic, I'm guessing? Were they refreshed by that? Because it seemed new to me when I was given that book. I was like, wow, this is not your typical gaming aesthetic.
Yeah, they were. I think it was within that adventure game, sort of genre, especially at that time, PC adventure games, downloadable. There was a lot of people that reacted really strongly to that because it just wasn't it didn't come out of something that already existed. It was not, at least in games. Of course, everything has, a derivation like quality to it. But on that
note, I mean, I will say some of the people, even toward the end at Disney Feature Animation, we got more and more people from Disney Interactive, from Dimgy.
Mm-hmm.
And even back then, this was the Cretaceous, for God's sake. But there was always a desire for better storytelling or more storytelling, if that makes sense. I think Silent Hill was new, and they're like, ooh, there's some level of storytelling we haven't seen before. So all the game designers that showed up at Disney Feature Animation would talk about this desire for better writing, and it's in the eye of the beholder sometimes. But I would say it's come a long way, right? And I think it's always evolving. But the few titles that I've worked on, not only was the art direction not thematically driven, but it was gameplay driven. But more so, it was derivative. Hey, let's, that one title that did really well, let's do a hook, put a hook on the character. Like, that was the best little bit of art direction I got, was put a hook on it, dude. Like, because it had been seen before,
Yeah.
A lot of the designs I did, they were like, yeah, cool, total freedom. Yeah, we love it. Green light. And then in the final couple weeks of this one gig, we just conformed everything back to the movie that was neck and neck with this title. Do you know what I mean? Like, it can be very derivative in gaming, is my experience.
Absolutely. And that's why it was so refreshing to have that kind of opportunity and early on, because that was my first time art directing. And I got so lucky that I got to art direct something that I got to, invent. Yeah.
Well, but it probably also made a big I think it probably changed or broadened the types of storytelling that are happening in gaming, just to guess.
I mean, I like to think so within that small genre. It's not like that wasn't the games that like all the 20, the mid 20 guys were playing and on their souped up PCs. This was like a different type of a slower pace immersion. The sound and the music was all really carefully considered. And so that's the other thing too, that it was just the immersion quality, like what you're giving the audience. I really love that, the theatrical element of it.
Yeah, and you guys were very aware of your demographic too, right? I think every gaming company probably has a brand and they know exactly who they're catering to. I feel like Virginia may have gone to the restroom, but I trust. Okay. I was like, I trust you'll pipe up if you have something to say. But I am looking at the clock, Brian, and very clearly we need to do a part 2 because you and I always have more to say. But maybe as a way, no, we're not wrapping it up like right now, but I want to get to your poem because I feel like it'll open some other conversations. So before we do wrap up, we try to go around an hour and 20 minutes. And the more I talk here, the more the clock's ticking. But in the interest of getting to some of those conversations, I know you had some things you did wish to impart to listeners. And we're not going to get to all of them, so we'll have a part 2, hopefully, if you're not too busy. But maybe the poem will open up some of those other conversations. Do you care to share that now, or is there a better transition?
I can, yeah.
Well, tell us quickly, though, as context, I do know that you have been incorporating your writing with your image making. Maybe you can tell us about the direct drawing. I wanted to get a little more of a definition on direct drawing and just what you're up to lately, really.
Yeah, well, there is probably part 2 in there because one of the things I wanted to talk about is just like the ability for drawing or art making to dealing with like, our deeper emotions and our subconscious, and the direct drawing is something that came out of a very difficult experience that I had in my family's life, and I was looking for, I didn't know it, but I needed a form of expression that would allow me to get some of these kind of emotions out, and I was going back and forth to work throughout this time period over these years, crossing the Puget Sound to go from Bainbridge Island to Seattle. And I started doing these drawings. And because I was on a ferry and a pen and ink and paper was the easiest thing, and it was very direct. And I didn't want to sketch anything. I just wanted to go. I just wanted to do. I just wanted the ink to flow. And so
that's what's meant by direct, is no block in.
Yeah, right. Okay, no sketching, just kind of like direct free association, symbolism, just trying to enter the flow state, and then letting whatever comes come.
But even content wise, you have no plan. It just comes out. Yeah. Hats off to you.
I mean, one of the things that, of course, like, what do you draw when you don't have an idea? And it's like, you kind of skip that step by just having that visual vocabulary like right there. And
Mhm.
then you oftentimes it'll be like these organic shapes. Maybe it'll be a tree. I started just like, pulling up my sort of deeper symbolism
Mhm.
and recognizing like if I draw a tree like 20 times, don't judge that I'm drawing a tree. Just understand that I'm drawing
Mhm.
a tree because I love a tree. And
Mhm.
that's my way of honoring the forms.
Mhm.
Um, and that was the thing of just kind of letting go and then the direct drawing. But that's when I started posting those ink drawings and I started getting people interested in them and it started to bring up a lot of things for people where they were like, wow, you're kind of helping me fall
Mhm.
back in love with drawing because
Mhm.
I've spent my whole life just trying to always chasing perfection or, sketching and getting to final and, even people that are like really successful comic book artists, they just felt like it had been so um, stilted or they
Mhm.
felt
Mhm.
caged by it,
Mhm. There's
And
almost permission to just let it flow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and this kind of unbridled
Mm.
um, quality to it that I just absolutely fell in love with. I became kind of addicted to it. So people, I started saying, hey, would you like, I love your work. And they would say, oh, I love your work. Do you want to do a trade? And so maybe it was an artist in Brazil or in Europe somewhere or South America, whatever, all these different places all over the world. And that's where this idea kind of came from is that it felt so special
Mm.
to open a package and carefully unwrap it and take out this drawing that somebody made. It was handmade, and they had put or pencil. It wasn't a reproduction, and the artifact nature of it, in even the journey that it had gone on through, across oceans or whatever it
Right.
was
Right.
so magical to me, and it piqued this part of me of being a little kid and like
Mm.
treasure and these the stories that we all go through and adventure, and it was just something magical. And I think one of the things that I don't know, it's 8:20 now, or it's in my time. Do I have time to talk about this a little bit more?
Absolutely. We go
Okay.
over, trust me, we have some really
Oh,
long
okay.
episodes. I like that. Yeah, I just wanted to gently steer it toward the poem, but I love this. This is
This
context
is
for the poem.
y-
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
Please.
And when I would get these drawings, and you'll totally relate to this. When I look at a drawing or a painting or a sculpture, I've spent my whole life looking at
Mm.
artwork.
Mm.
And when I look at, an artist's work, I can see them in the marks. I
Mm.
can see their personality. I can see their influences. I can read the drawing
Mhm.
in a way that's much deeper than just the visual.
Mhm.
And I think that makes a lot of sense to artists, but if you think
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
other people who have not looked at art their whole life, or maybe that they've always felt a distance from it, everyone can appreciate, everybody's got eyeballs and everybody can appreciate how it makes them feel or their reactions to it. But oftentimes it stops with, it's not for me, or, ooh, I really love that.
Mhm.
But for artists, I think it gets to this place where we can see so much in it. And so
Well, I
anyway,
think in it,
yeah, oh, go ahead.
at best, if somebody's really, I don't know, taken their journey, the chemin artistique, to bring back the French, taking their artist's journey seriously, it can be the purest expression of your soul on paper or,
Yeah,
on canvas. And
exactly.
we've had writers on here that have said it's kind of between the lines, that abstract territory that only language can access is, not to put words in anyone's mouth, but yet a very pure expression of our subjective consciousness, our souls, if that doesn't
Yeah.
scare anyone. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, I think people are stilted, and there's some people that don't have that direct access or that visceral intuitive access to their pure consciousness. But for those who do, it transcends. And I think even that people that can't articulate it are going to sense that
Yeah.
in the
And then
world.
the thing with me is I didn't have access to that until this process and this kind of thing happened in me where it just started bubbling up.
Well, you needed
And
to purge and have a
I
catharsis, I'm
did.
guessing. Yeah.
I did, and it's gets into that whole thing of like, you have to live and you have to go to the bottom of the well to discover these things sometimes. And I did. I went down deep and found it, and it started springing up. And so let me read it, and I can tell you what I was yeah. So the idea, well, anyway, it's how do you start? Okay. It's called 1,000 Miles Apart.
Mhm.
How they came to be in the desert that day, I will never know. But let me tell you what I remember. On the thin path, pale and parched, drawn along the earth by the hooves of beasts, they walked from different worlds unknown, from obscure histories evolving in their own. The desire for discovery like a building thirst, growing and growing until one day, stepping from their separate shelters, they embarked, 1,000 miles apart. One with drawings bound with string, and one with wooden carvings packed away. Two artists set off in the shadowless gloam, one toward the horizon's pale glow, the other toward the sinking silver moon. And in their separate silence walking, curious minds blessed with wandering, they followed the light by candles 1,000 miles apart. Each of them with no spoken language, no alphabet or written word, simply listened deeply to the sounds of the earth and hummed the tune of their heart.
I love
And
that.
as the night fell, they made solitary camps, alone in separate silence, but sharing the same blanket of stars, and they dreamed impossible dreams 1,000 miles apart. And one carefully drew a sheet of paper from the bundle that he had, and the other turned a piece of wood with dark calloused hands. While one looked into the emptiness of white to find the secrets there, the other felt the flowing grain and the warmth of fleeting forms. One set his pen and began to see what lines were meant to be, and far away another flame caught the glint of a careful blade, and he began to carve away all that's not, while the other drew all that never was, 1,000 miles apart.
Wow.
That's it.
Really beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's really beautiful. It's strong imagery. And that leads me to a question I wanted to ask earlier. In the freeform drawing, do you find archetypes come out of you? Do you recognize universality in the images that come out of you? Because I feel in your writing, I don't know all of your writing, but over the years I've read enough of it to know it's very visual. That was so evocative and visual, and yet the resonance had more to do with the symbology. So I just had wanted to ask that earlier. Do you see archetypes that are universal, or do you not examine it when they
I
pop out?
do. Well, oftentimes I examine it like afterwards.
Mhm.
I sometimes do like that free association where I take the drawings and I lay them out, and I especially like the connections that form between two completely unrelated things, because each one of these drawings I would do like a 35-minute on the way to work and 35 minutes on the way home at the end of the day. And I call the body of work the crossing for that, because it's the crossing of the ferry each way, one drawing each
Mhm.
way,
Mhm.
over years. And so there's like, many, many hundreds. But one of the things that I think about with like voice and style is that you kind of are excavating these ancient symbols within
Mhm.
you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they're things that you've gleamed onto, something that resonated with you. Maybe it's things you've seen, but I also think there's an element of that. We talked about it in that creativity panel, that epigenetics of like
Mhm. Yeah. Oh,
things.
dude. Sorry. Go.
No, 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 like the symbolism that's
Right.
passed down
Right.
is so. It's. I feel like when you're making this work or like writing or whatever, if you're tapping into this kind of timelessness that isn't not about like the just our what we're experiencing here on the surface level is just the
Mhm.
blink of an eye. It's the tip of an iceberg. But what is deep, deep, deep within us, I think, is this connected symbolism.
Yes.
And
Well,
where it comes from, that's such a cool philosophical question,
yeah, well, I think this poem makes us think about all of that. And I want to quick before I'm trying to stop you from saying too much about your intention, because I think what I got out of it is right in line with your intention. Of course, I think that, but I want to ask you about a specific line. So I just think it's all really beautiful. But since you mentioned the word epigenetics, I did find it fascinating that the line, they walked from different worlds unknown, from obscure histories evolving on their own. At first I thought, ooh, I wonder if that's a typo, because it could be obscure histories evolving on their own. But you said from obscure histories evolving in their own. So I wrote in their own histories, right? That's the implication.
Yes.
So I wrote, I can't read my own writing because it's so tiny. I wrote shared lineage, cellular memory, epigenetics, threading all individuals together into the collective. Over time. So yeah, that one line kind of put me in touch with what we're tapping into, and it is kind of intergenerational and speaks to epigenetics. So I didn't imagine that, right?
Yeah, no, that was right. Yeah, and I think the overall thing that I was trying to convey too is that what if we couldn't talk to one another? What if we couldn't speak? We didn't have a language. We didn't have a tongue or a way to form words. And just like the owl that hunts in the night, over hundreds or thousands of years, it's evolved its sense of hearing and its sense of sight. If I couldn't speak, then my sense of visual interpretation of, if you handed me a drawing and I didn't know you at all, I could read that drawing as if it were your life, a poem from your heart.
Absolutely.
And in the same way that so I put these two artists, one carves things and the other one writes things.
Okay.
And so, go ahead.
Well, for the listeners, I debated. I'm just kind of being fully transparent here. For the listeners, I did read it beforehand. Of course, I took notes. I had to read it many times, and I let it sink in, and even overnight, I think the puzzle pieces, cemented themselves. And I wrote my interpretation. But I was telling Brian in the green room before we came on here, like, it's not my time to play critic and feed back to you. This podcast is not about me, but I said sometimes, that's a great exercise to see if you're conveying your intention. And so we were debating about whether I tell what I got out of it before you reveal your intention or not. And we're doing a little of both here, but I'm trying to stop you because I want to confirm that you really, I don't know, I just think there's got to be some value to hearing what people get out of it. Have many people said back to you about this poem?
Not in particular this one, but I've shared it with my kids and my family, my wife, just the idea behind it. And I think it resonates. There's a lot to think about there, I think.
Yeah, that's why I'm just tempted. I'm stopping you because I kind of wanted to share what I got out of it, because it would be confirmation to you that you've transcended.
Please.
Well,
that would be an honor for me. Please.
It's a little too late, but that's the idea, is that, we want to know it's transcending and speaking to people. But I fully got this idea that I love the word ineffable. Does that word mean anything to you? Ineffable defies language.
Oh, yes.
I've often said, most truth defies language. Language is insufficient to characterize the ineffable, I put it, And so I very much got that straight out the gate, that this is about kind of not the function of art, but one of them, right, is that it speaks, like I was saying, between the lines, like one of our guests said. It's the non-linear space between the lines where language, can create, I don't know, fill in the gaps, but it can also be completely insufficient. So I do want to point something out to you, and then maybe you can speak to your intention. But I know what I got out of it, and I guess I'm resisting sharing that. But I did find it because I think there's a micro level like, ooh, this is what Brian's twisted psyche was working out, right? I'm kidding. But then it's like, ooh, but what's the universal version of that? What does it say about all of us? But then I'm the weirdo who always goes to the major metaphysical level, the meta view of what it says about existence, not just the human condition, but the expression of consciousness in the physical realm. I didn't want to lose anyone, but for me, there was many levels to this. So I just wanted to say, isn't it interesting that you can apply whatever symbolism you want to desert, right?
Yeah.
For me, a desert is the chaos of existence. It's life. It's seemingly that, empty and void, but they are meeting, right, from very isolated places. So I think it's pretty obvious that the two characters, whether you see it as two aspects of Brian's psyche or two aspects of the human condition, that they're kind of meeting, right, in a vast desert. I don't want to say the obvious either, but to me, I think it's fascinating, and maybe you can speak to this, that one uses an additive medium and one uses a subtractive. Has any symbolism occurred to you what that might mean?
No, but it's because, I mean, it's definitely, I think it's so interesting to hear this actually, because the reason, one of the reasons I fell in love with the wood carving was the subtractive nature of it, and having it be, it basically defies everything that you do on the computer, which is like build up, Control Z, Control Z. I mean, everything has like a, safety net, blah, blah, blah. And when you're carving, there is no undo, so you really have to be in tune with, it's not necessarily what you want to make, it's what the wood wants to become.
Exactly.
And because go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to really quickly rattle off what I got out of it. And we're on the same page for sure. But I think even, sometimes we subconsciously do things in our writing, and that's the beauty of art. It can be so universal if you've hit on something that the projections of the patron play into it, So I'm just going to quickly rattle it off because it's not about me. But I think, I tuned into your intention because to me, it was about these two entities, again, maybe warring aspects of you or not, maybe two dual aspects of the human condition, but what are they is what I was wondering. And so to me, I immediately got like, ooh, the act of creation gives us access to the common meeting ground, so it spoke very much of our isolation, right? Our subjective realities, which can be very separate and isolated, but then there is a meeting ground somewhere. Where is it? Ooh, it's in the act of creation, right? And how interesting that one was additive and one was subtractive. So on the major macro level, I just kind of thought, hey, maybe, and you can just think about this, you might not have been your intention, but maybe it was about ego and pure consciousness, which is our souls, right? So maybe our pure consciousness, our souls, want to add beauty, right? We create beauty, we create meaning, right, Virginia? We're meaning makers. So we add beauty by making those marks. And then the subtracting was like the chipping away at ego that allows you to meet in the middle. So to me, divinity is when you chip away at ego enough to where your pure soul can come into the equation of existence, So I just felt like, ooh, they're meeting in the middle, and it's something to do with ego, kind of having to chip away like a sculptor. I think it's been said many times, Michelangelo sees the form, like the Aristotelian form that's already exists in the ether, but you got to bring it into fruition. So I got like all of that, like even the Ayn Rand idea that, creativity is taking concepts and making them percepts, right? And so, I don't know, there was something about additive meant you're creating beauty, whereas subtracting means you're chipping away at ego to access pure consciousness. Does that resonate at all?
Super cool. Totally resonates. And I'm thinking of it now through, that lens as well, because I totally believe that you write these things and these things come to you on multiple levels, and I think that's a really, really fascinating interpretation. Super cool. Thank you.
I'm glad. You don't have to answer now. You can think about it. But I mean, there is no surface level to this poem, but I think ostensibly it's about craft, but then it does say something larger about spirituality. That's my word, and I didn't want to lose anyone, but I think creativity is the ultimate way to bring divinity into the physical realm. I've said too much. Sorry.
Mhm.
The act of creativity is maybe bringing collective consciousness or even our higher consciousness into the perceptual realm. Am I just saying the same thing
Yeah.
over and over again?
No, I love it. I love it. And I think that the I saw this thing by this guy. Do you know the author Percival Everett? He
It
wrote
sounds
James.
familiar. No.
It he I haven't read the book,
Oh,
but I got
James,
my
the movie James. Wasn't there a movie James?
I don't know if they've made it into a movie. It's
Okay,
just
sorry.
yeah. Um he said that artists and writers and we're like facilitators and
Yes.
we are like tuning all the time to try to catch some idea or some thought or something that we have to express. I'm not paraphrasing this very well, but then it absolutely requires a reader, a viewer, an audience
Mhm.
to interact with it for it to become the thing.
Yes. Well, that's
And
almost the observer effect, right? If we're antennas and we're just fine tuning something and finding the frequency to communicate it to others, uh, the observer effect, right? Does a tree? I mean, and now I'm making a mixed metaphor here, right? But does a
if a
tree?
tree fall,
Yeah,
yeah,
if nobody's there to hear it, did it really fall? It's the same
yeah,
thing as the observer effect, right? That those waves don't become particles until there's an observer there to reify the information.
yeah.
Okay, go on. Sorry.
No, I mean it's just that synthesis or that alchemy or whatever happens when a certain, it's a little bit like when a flame catches uh, when you light a piece of paper or something and that spark catches fire.
Mhm.
It requires those two things, those two substances to happen.
Mhm.
But the fire that comes from it is a pure energy of its own and it's completely unique. So how I interpret a novel or a painting or something is going to be totally different from how you do or somebody
Mhm.
else. And but I loved that idea that we are facilitators and we really need to communicate things, but we don't have this like divine plan.
No.
We're just in tune to something that maybe could help somebody else change their perspective, see something differently, feel something differently. Um, that to me is just so beautiful and it gets back to that human connection, which is another big theme of the poem, which is just, they're driven by this curiosity to see what's out there. And so they go on this epic journey and they meet and they can connect with one another even without this language and read the history of one another. And it's it's really it's just a really neat thing. I want to spend a lot more time delving into this in my own work.
Well,
I just
yeah, you're preaching to the choir because I mean, I try to be very pragmatic about craft, like as far as talent. Oh, it's not God given. It's something one devotes oneself to and right and does all those
Mhm.
exercises and perfects. But I'm sorry, I'm an elitist at the end of the day that we need to give credit to artists and visionaries and creatives of all kinds, right? There's all kinds of creative acts all day, every day. But let's recognize it as, yes, being a conduit, as you said, or being an
Mhm.
antenna. And it is no small thing, especially in this fascist,
Mhm.
milieu right now. That's what we're protecting is the fact that we wouldn't evolve without people that held up a mirror to society and our own humanity as an agent, right, in its
Yeah.
evolution. So call me an elitist, but that's what we're trying to protect here, in my understanding. And I don't see, and I'm going to broaden it. It's not sculptors and or painters or authors. It's all creatives, all
Exactly.
innovators are
Yeah.
harnessing and contributing it back for our collective evolution. So anyway, I
Yeah.
love what you said, and even in your prompts, you wrote something about maybe true, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe true inspiration is if you're driven to draw or paint something or tell a story, it's because someone out there needs to hear it.
Yes. That I don't know who told me that. I really can't I can't recall. It might have been anyway, somebody told me that and it really just because I was like, what's the point? I'm doing all this work. Like, I don't know if it's making a difference for anybody. But if you're compelled to do it,
Hmm.
then it's because somebody needs to see it.
Hmm.
And
Well, I'm
then
going to plug my book though, because it can sound very kind of mystical and not empirical. What's the opposite? Rational, believe it or not, is the opposite of empirical. It sounds pretty woo-woo, but my book makes a case for how quantum mechanics supports this, epigenetics supports it, and I kind of try to connect all the dots, where it's not that mystical. If you are called upon to do it, it's because collective intelligence knows what's needed next in our dialectic, and we all have our individual gifts, right? And we all have inspiration all day, every day to contribute what's needed next from us, right?
yeah,
Through our particular gifts. So I
yeah.
didn't say it very well, but I have
Well, but I love it.
375 pages, to make my case in that book.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that because I think then as creators, the thing that I know that I struggle with, I know a lot of other creators do, is just that feeling of um, what's it all for kind
Yeah,
of thing.
futility, especially right now.
Yeah,
It's like, why bother? Trust me, I have to renew my faith all day, every day. This podcast really helps,
yeah.
and interfacing with people like you that get it. I do go, why bother? I mean, trust me, right? Virginia knows right after the election, I'm like,
Mhm.
never thought I'd be here, but people suck way more than I knew. At least 50% of Americans, anyway, suck, and like, why bother? I don't even have kids to leave a better planet to. So for me to get up every morning and continue, I always think of Mother Teresa. She says, well, I didn't see evidence of God for 20 years, but I did the work.
Yeah.
So that's what faith is, right? Is not giving up on humanity or life or any of that. Sorry if I went off the rails there, but for me, I have to just go, that's what faith is. You do the work, even if you don't see the evidence for 20 years.
And sometimes it's the work is just being open to like, again, like having the antenna up and
Mm-hmm.
like putting yourself in situations where that kind of magic can happen. Like the other day, my wife and I went to eat at this seafood restaurant we totally love and down by the beach and there was a guy sitting next to us by himself and he had this book with a really interesting title. We both noticed it. And I think it was something like things the fortune teller said to me. Um, and we noticed that he was at the very end of it. So we were like, oh, we both want to ask him about this book, but he's at the end. So let's wait till he finishes. And then, he finished his book and his meal and he got up to leave and we talked to him about the book and it was just one of those like beautiful human moments
Wow.
where we weren't on our phones. He was reading an actual book.
Oh,
So
wow.
it gave us something to talk about. We connected on that. We heard about his whole story about traveling in Southeast Asia, which is what this book is about, and all the things that taught him about life and the way his whole worldview. And it was just one of those things where you're like, wow, that was so special and so rare these
Yeah.
days.
Well, does the word peak experience mean anything to you?
No, I don't
Virginia
know.
loves when I mention Maslow, right, Virginia?
Oh yeah,
Because he's
hierarchy of needs.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's one of the ideas, these peak experiences. So when you're aligned, or call it what you want, right? When you're, like you said, you have no diversions or devices in your hand and you're in the moment, you're tapped into synchronicity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've all had them. I've said this on the podcast too, enough shrooms and acid to know, there's way more going on here. And we all love those days when we're not in a huge hurry, right? And I mean, The
Yeah,
Nameless Prince is all about just going down into the LA Wash one day because he could. We don't always have the luxury of being in the moment, but I do think that's when the magic happens. And maybe when souls align, right? So I don't think you imagined it. I think that's a real soulful experience that happened there. And I would just call it a peak experience, because,
yeah,
and yeah, we should all be receptive all day, every day. Artists have, how in the creative, I wanted to say this a moment ago, by the way, you kind of hinted that until the patron or the observer completes the circuit,
Yeah.
right? That it's almost like that tree hasn't fallen in the woods because there's no one there to hear it. So I've always wanted to add a step to the creative process that says like, okay, but what about when you're done? Does it
Yeah.
collect dust under the bed? Does it change one person's life in a cornfield in Iowa? You know, does it reach, I don't know, does it go viral and change the world? What is that final step in the creative process?
Yeah, and does it ever end? Because if it just, I love that completing the circuit. I wrote that down because I think that's really how it is. There's like this crackling energy when you have something you made, and so many people just put it in the trash or put it in the drawer.
For
I
a
mean,
variety
myself
of
included.
reasons, right?
Oh yeah,
For fear of
yeah,
reception, fear of falling short of your own expectations. Outcome is overrated, right? But
yeah,
I think we're driven to share. I do.
yeah. And these drawings were such a good lesson for me about you know, just draw all the time. Just I
Mm-hmm.
drew every day, multiple times a day, and there's just lots of bad drawings, lots of drawings that I felt were better than others, but I really started removing the judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was drawing so much, it didn't really matter. It was just fluid. Like
Beautiful.
the flow was never off. So yeah, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that comes out. And was stepping away from judgment
Mm-hmm.
was one of the biggest things for me as an artist because I have lived my life judging constantly my
Mm-hmm.
work. I think we all
Mm-hmm.
do that, and it sucks because it really
I agree.
kills. I think it really kills what you have to say. And I don't know if there's anybody listening that could take that message to heart. It's like, just try to just not judge yourself and just draw what you love, draw what you feel, and do a lot of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
volume is huge because it's a language that we've mostly stifled, and you can't stifle it. You have to speak in that language a lot to become fluent, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you're onto something for sure. I mean, it's more than just being in the zone regularly and having momentum. And you are really onto something because I think inspiration transcends too. So the fact that you're tapping into the zone, do you know what I mean? That
yeah.
transcends and it moves people and touches people. So on that note, I think I saw on your Insta that you're
Mhm.
making a book of your writings accompanied by imagery. What is not that there has
Yeah.
to be an outcome, but I
Yeah.
believe you have a project in the works that incorporates the artwork and your writings. Is that right?
I do. And this is something that I don't know if you and I have talked about over the years, but I've struggled a lot with this idea of, if I make a book of drawings, how much does it have to tell a linear story
Mm-hmm.
versus being these abstract journal type images? And
Mm-hmm.
then does the writing that accompanies that have to be linear and direct? So actually, you're one of the people that I really wanted to talk about this with lately because I don't know. I kind of have a feeling of how what the final outcome should feel like and look like.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrestle with this because I'm like, oh, these are all, quote unquote unrelated drawings. But of course, in my mind, they all come from this direct source, so they're very
Mm-hmm.
much related.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I want to talk about is that. But then it's like I don't want to put too many words. It's like you don't want to
Well, there's
over-explain. And
just a forward, I think when you go to
yeah,
a gallery and they force you to write a blurb, right? Sometimes
mhm,
it's just art speak,
yeah,
gobbledygook, right? For the patrons, and I actually had a little art critique generator. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen online, but art critique generator. And you just put like one column is the juxtaposition, and the next one of the illusory flux, and then the next column is
oh,
like of the formal properties of, like, and I think sometimes that is overrated, but I could see a forward explaining the nonlinear approach to just consolidating images. So it's ironic
yeah,
because just this morning I looked at your Insta in preparation,
mhm,
and it was a video and you were saying, hey, I'm just lining up all my drawings on the table here, kind of
mhm,
interesting to see how they relate. And I wrote, yeah, it's more than an unexpected rhythm and flow to the compositions, right? How it leads the eye around. It was rhythm and flow, but it was also like, only by doing that do you have, ooh, that totally breaks the rules and takes you into this completely nonlinear space. Like if for no good reason at all, one of your dark shapes leads you off the page or to another panel.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating to just trust our meaning making. The patron's going to attribute meaning, but also randomness. Like that is where the growth is when you get into uncomfortable territory. So maybe I'm encouraging you to just use a nonlinear approach. I'm sorry, every time I see your drawings just laid out randomly, it's like, holy crap, it tells a story that's way beyond something a human brain could come up with, taking a linear approach. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? That's the poetry of it, is that it's almost like, I don't know, putting the cart before the horse. Instead of manufacturing something to serve an outcome, you're creating a more a more open experience for the patron, because they get to project on it and project the meaning on it.
Yeah. And it's like, by removing, and it's been very, very hard for me, just intellectually or logically or whatever, to remove that preconception that you always kind of approach art with. At least I have my whole life. Like, what am I going to draw now? Or I already have an idea of what I'm going to draw. I've sketched it. There's a problem I'm trying to solve. There's a concept or whatever, and just layer by layer. And I think the subtractive carving, getting back to what you were saying, is what allowed me to feel so free. There's like a trust and a faith that you have to have, like you're just going to you have to jump and see if the wings work. Kind of
Right.
And I think that, if you do that, the viewer will, those things will resonate. Those recurring symbols, those, there's a man on a journey, and there's these, a lot of it is, a deep exploration of kind of shadow selves and things. But I just released myself of any plan.
It's beautiful.
And in doing so, it kind of, manifested.
Yeah, it shows through. Trust me, it transcends that. You're onto something is the best way I can put it. And it's pretty divine. And it's powerful. It transcends whatever you've done. So I do think, we're interested in the parallels, whenever we talk about color harmony, in music, there's 1, 3, 5. There's all these amazing parallels between the disciplines. But I think what we're talking about would have value to a violin player, if that makes sense. So in that spirit, I just want to say different strokes work for different folks. And in my visual art, it is not my chosen craft. I have never gotten there. I've never embraced, it was no regrets. Like, I told some great stories at Disney. I made a life for myself. I got to travel, you know what I mean? But I never had any delusions that it's my self-expression. It was a craft, and it was a great career. I was proud of what I put out into the universe. But in terms of really maturing my relationship with any one craft, it was never going to be illustration. I joke, like, if somebody gave me a bunch of, it's a vocation, not an avocation. Yeah, it's a vocation. Yeah, but I didn't give up on it. I thought, God, if somebody gave me a bunch of money tomorrow to create a body of work for a gallery show, actually at one point I thought it would have to be abstract. Completely. Well, conceptual for sure. Conceptual, and whatever medium was demanded, whether it's video or installation art or collage, multimedia, it would be conceptually driven, because that's how I most identify. I also thought, I miss oil painting. I'd have nowhere to do it. I don't even have a garage right now. So if somebody put me up in a studio, I would probably not bring out my bag of tricks, because that's old and tired, right? Figurative, figural. It would probably be completely abstract. But
I'd love to see that.
But I've kind of gotten to the point where my most mature vehicle of expression is my writing. It's not going to be my illustration. So I envy you. I think it's beautiful work. I think one day maybe I'll really mature that part of myself. But right now it's the writing. So Anyway, but everything you've said, like, ooh, yes, kind of letting go of outcome and trusting that balance between having structure, but also letting it be free flowing. I've often said having an outline is what allows the happy accidents. If I didn't know where I was going with a piece, I would probably beat my head against a wall, and it flows because I know where I'm headed, or I really know what the intent is, put it that way. The inspiration was strong enough where I know what the end goal is to a degree. It still evolves. So it's a balance, isn't it?
It is a balance. And I think about it in terms of, if I ever had the opportunity to do a graphic novel, like it would be amazing. If I had dreamed about that I dreamed about it for like my whole life, but it scares the crap out of me because it kind of means that I might have to have a linear, like how would I take my approach and make it work? Like, would I be back in that same world of, oh, I'm making a product?
Yeah.
How would I navigate that? And yeah, it's always been a thing for me. I mean, one of the things that coming full circle to Art Center is Dave McCarskey. I had an illustration class, like one of my late term things. And of course, we were just going through the motions, doing your sketches and your concepts, and then doing a final. And I just hated. At Art Center, I came to really hate that process of making the quote unquote final because it just felt like I was killing the energy. And I said, I showed him my sketches, and he's like, "Man, your sketches have so much energy, and they're so gestural." And I said, I love my sketches, and I hate my finals. Like any final I've done, I hate it to this day. And he said, "Well, why don't you just take your little thumbnail and Xerox it, blow it up to 11 by 17, paste it onto a board, and start painting directly onto this blown up sketch." And it was really life-changing for me, that concept, because it allowed me to retain that energy. And
McCarskey is a wise man. No, you told that story in the creativity panel, and then I
did. Oh
yeah, no, I love it. It's so, because it's a parable, and I told my own McCarskey story, but there's a lot of wisdom in that because it's kind of symbolic of retaining the initial inspiration throughout the hot and cold parts of the creative process. And so that's one thing that saves people, true, because we all deal with that, trust me, to a degree. Like, I mean, a lot of people love the ideation process, the conceptualization process, that initial expression of the inspiration, whether it's in a thumbnail form or whatever, and they effing hate rendering, and they feel they've lost the magic. It is tedious. I used to love rendering because it was meditative.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean the pieces weren't stilted and stifled. I just liked rendering. I wasn't afraid of it. But I guess what I would say is the execution, you just always have to keep in mind that it's a colder, part of the creative process. Dave Zabosky would say, you don't go straight for the goal, you stalk it. You go through more intellectual, more intuitive, hot and cold, as he calls it. But really, once people fully understand the creative process, then those romantic notions dissolve a little bit. And again, I had a very young nephew that once said, "Dude, because I have to promote books long after I wrote them. And I fear, do I even care about this anymore? Or, is it really going to speak to anyone?" And he said, if it was inspired in the first place, that transcends. So you got to have that faith. So when you're rendering something, just have faith that those strokes will always be underlying the finish,
Yeah, but then you look at those, those artists that we studied, the N.C. Wyeth and the Singer Sargents, and you just look at how much like gesture and life they have when they're making their final things, and that they went through like studies after studies after studies.
I admired admired my students that would kind of resist the very linear process. I was teaching what we do in animation. You do you finalize your drawing, you finalize the layout, then you do a value study, then a color key and a finish, and very linear, and people resisted it. And it was just a tool with the goal always being eventually you're just going to do it intuitively, and you may skip a step or whatever, but once in your life, go through this linear process and it'll become a tool on your tool belt. But I still secretly admired people that kept it fun every step of the way. Does that make sense? Whether it meant doing a looser value study with markers, whatever, kept it fun for them. God, my hat is off to you.
Yeah, because that hot and cold, that's really what you learned, and it was brutal. It's hard to survive that, but
yeah, that's the nature of art school, though. Okay, so we're going to steer it to a close, Brian. I do think maybe there's a part two. I would love to talk to you more about how to retain the freedom that you've found while maybe doing a project that feels more linear or like it's asking for more structure. Let's keep talking about that later.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Cool. And I know you're busy, but maybe there's a part two. Any final words of wisdom you would want to share with listeners, whether about story or the creative process or anything to do with creative expression?
I think just that, like, I was talking with my wife about this, and we talk about the fact that we're like 48 now, and how she's laments the fact that she hasn't written a novel yet or published a novel. She's written 2 novels, but she hasn't published yet. And there's certain things about like living your life and adversity too. It's the highs and the lows, it's the agony and the ecstasy that informs what we make, and it informs the stories we tell. And we have to have patience and let these processes kind of work over time. And then those will be the things that we draw from and or paint from or compose from. And we can't do it without that life and that living. And so everybody wants to rush. And I think it's just one of those things. It's a painful lesson, but just deep connection and presence in the life you're living is going to be everything that informs what you make and the connections you make through it, I think.
Beautiful. Absolutely. I love that, because sometimes it's ego, right? When we want to leave a legacy, and actually life is happening now. So if you think of it from the artist's lens, only life experience informs the work, but also, not everybody needs to contribute through their craft. What about the legacy of just raising a family? And do you know what I mean? Like that's a legacy in and of itself. So I think everybody has to decide for themselves. I do know, like my sister, has empty nest syndrome. Once they're up and out of the nest, sometimes you do want to tap back into your craft as a mode of expression, but also as a contribution. So I agree with everything you said, but I think also maybe just some people are here to live life, maybe not to use the surrogate of reflecting back life. Life's happening now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's enough.
There is plenty.
Okay, Virginia, are you with us?
I am, and I was just going to say that when you made the comment, Nick, about how there's people who are just living life, the way I was thinking about it, and this is the counselor brain of me that was kicking in. They're the witnesses to the creation of everybody else. Wow, yeah. Well, we're steering this to a close. We really are, but it sounds a little bit like my friend Marie-Martine Bessot was convinced at one point, I'm here to support artists. Her whole mission and purpose was to support her musician husband. She's now divorced him and she's changed her tune. But I kind of like that idea. Like we've said a million times, it takes a lot of different threads to make up the tapestry of humanity, and amen to all of it. Was that kumbaya enough for everybody? Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you, Brian. And I would love to do a part 2 if you ever have time. I think we just kind of addressed the tip of an iceberg here.
Yeah, it sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you for being here. And to our listeners, remember, life is story, and we can get our hands in the clay. Individually and collectively, we can tell a new story. See you next time.
We want to take a moment to thank our wonderful listeners and supporters. Your continued support and sharing of our podcast helps us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please rate and review us on your favorite platform and share the podcast with friends and family. For more enriching conversations and insights, subscribe to Language of the Soul podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media and visit our Patreon website for the latest updates and exclusive content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining our Patreon community for exclusive content and donation options. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds.